Yeah, we're required for nothing.
Good afternoon, Senate institutions. It's Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. We're going to talk about the State House expansion today. Who wants to lead off this discussion? Joe Asia, welcome to the table.
Well, thank you.
You've been nominated.
Has that gone through yet?
Not yet.
Okay, I can do it for you.
All right, well, if you want to start,
Okay.
other emails are coming in. No, I'm good. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Asia. I'm the Director for Design and Construction with Buildings and General Services. There you go. Okay, all right. So we're here today for the State House Pandemic Mitigation Project, also known as the State House Expansion. Next slide, please.
It's known as the Pandemic Mitigation Project.
Yes, well, it was, and the reason being is we started, and I'll get to that.
Okay.
The Acts of '83 was approved by the governor on March 16th. Was the beginning of this to provide the funding for Buildings and General Services to start this project. We were awarded $1.5 million of ARPA funds for this. And so I know before May 1st, BGS working with collaboration with Sergeant Arms were to start the program and schematic design for this project. And then upon our approval and funding from the General Assembly is the intent of the General Assembly that the Sergeant Arms and BGS will extend the RFP for architectural and engineering services to finalize the design. The next slide, please. And then with Act 180, capital, we had in there that the Department of Buildings and General Services was then authorized to begin the design, construction, and the expansion of the State House. Next slide. So, with the Federal Register and the final rule that came out with the ARPA funding was how all these projects for ARPA were going to play out. I forget how many pages the final rule is, but it's quite lengthy. And in there for capital expenditures should be related and reasonably proportionate response to the public health and or negative impact of the pandemic. So basically what this is, what they were laying out, and it's going to be here for the slide, is you just can't go out and say we need an addition because of the pandemic. So then go through a justification analysis. For the capital expenditures that were over $1 million required an additional analysis. So we were awarded $1.5 million. So we have to go through additional processes for this. One of them is a questionnaire that we had to do, and then update this questionnaire. Lengthy of the stuff, the things that they asked for. And then because the questionnaire came out before the final rule was complete, it had to be tweaked, and so we had to do additional follow-up on that. Under comparison, we had a balance of effectiveness, the effectiveness and the cost of proposed capital expenditure against alternative and demonstrate that their proposed capital expenditure is superior. So what we're starting to glean from that is in there that you just can't get to an expansion. There was a process to get us there. And so we're starting to do that process in the RFP. Then reasonably proportional. New construction may not be proportional response to mitigate or prevent COVID-19. New construction can be more expensive than alternative approaches that are equal to or more effective in decreasing the spread of COVID. So it's really about the existing or the past pandemic of COVID-19 and how to mitigate you coming back into the State House and functionally just like you did before the pandemic. Next slide, please. So on our timeline, we started to meet with the Agency of Administration and Leadership on how to map out our RFP. We did that on starting on April 21st. On May 2nd, BGS submitted a required fiscal recovery fund, the SFR questionnaire, as I just mentioned, to AOA. May 1st, the Treasury issued the final interim rule, and that is where we then had to follow up in May 20th with an additional answers to that questionnaire. On June 2nd, BGS was informed that the revised version of the questionnaire is required to reflect changes from the Treasury Department final rule. So the final rules, some of those things I just mentioned on the past slide. We submitted our updated version of the questionnaire on June 17th and June 30th. But I didn't put it in here. Sorry, going back to May 20th, we issued the RFP. We put that on the street so that we could then get design firms to bid on this project. And so with the final rule and what we had learned out of that was, since we can't just jump to an addition and it has to be around the pandemic, how are we going to get there? So we developed the RFP so that you first look at the existing spaces and how they work in a pandemic style situation with separation and everything else. That also would include the HVAC renovations that were underway. Then you look at your existing spaces, and the final rule stated that we had to look at all the spaces that are controlled by the legislature. So that would include 1 Baldwin, 2 4 Aiken, and 109. 109 in and out of the picture every now and then, but that's what this process is going to do. Then we're also looking at, once you evaluate that, what rooms, committee rooms, or what have you for other spaces get to move in all those areas and how that works. Can we provide the function pre-pandemic in a pandemic-like situation with that? And so, like right now, you are using rooms 9, 10, and 11 as committee rooms. Can those stay? So that's something that we evaluate now, because you're using those rooms. There is a loss of space for officing, large committees, hearings, and the likes of that. So that all has to be brought into account. We'd be looking at also like 2 Aiken. The 2 Aiken become, it's an office building, but could it become used for committees? Could we put 2 or 3 committee rooms over there? And when you evaluate that, you go through the process and go, okay, it is handicap accessible, but it's an old home, it's historic, it's office space. So if you took out the first floor and opened it up, does that work? Well, historic preservation, all that comes into play. And say, if you let the first floor alone, maybe put in the second floor, that's the required element. So all this has to come into play to get us to a point where, in the end, it very well could show that, yes, an addition of some sort is needed. We've also included evaluating the cafeteria. And with that evaluation is very similar to the pandemic situation of that. Right now, there's missing seats, so that is not as full as it could be because of the pandemic situation. So what do? That also goes with the summer committee that evaluated, looked at past designs that moved the cafeteria to the upper floor, another floor to be constructed. Does that have to be done? Can something else be done? And the likes of that. So that's what that whole process is going through. We're also evaluating at the same time a sprinkler mist system for the areas between the second floor here that do not have a sprinkler system. We're also looking at, coming out of the summer committee, was if you're going to do an addition, to put in place the infrastructure for future additions, whatever that means. And so that's what the design team is looking at. And then there's also talk about code review. So that firm is looking at that. The mist system, the infrastructure items, and the code review are not part of ARPA. They're being covered by DGS planning line item. So that all that comes into corporation. And so that's what the RFP was about. So we jump ahead to June 30th. After we had our questionnaires and we learned a lot more about what was required, we put out addendum number 4, and that was responding to 45 questions that our bidders had. And because of that, the number of questions that we had, including the additional items that we learned about spending ARPA funds, we extended the completion date to July 27th, 2022. On July 22nd, we issued another addendum, number 5, that we extended the deadline again due to the review of the federal requirements, because there was additional stuff that came out that we had to provide them. Some of it was also around like the Bacon, the Brooks Act, stuff like that. We have to comply. So at the last minute, we put that out. Next slide, please. On August 5th, we issued yet another deadline to include additional federal requirements. On August 24th, we issued our last addendum, number 7, and we had an additional 16 questions on. And those are around the federal requirements and like that, a few other additional questions that they had. On August 31st, we received the bids. We only received 2 bids on this. Now, that's also part of that whole bid that's going on right now, that a lot of firms are busy. This is a potentially large project. And so some of the firms, that could have in the past bid on it, maybe it had enough work, it did not, but don't know the actual answer to that. On September 30th and October 18th, BGS and the SAA team that we had, the Sergeant at Arms, met to review the RFP responses. The Sergeant at Arms had 2 votes on the committee. On October 27th, there was clarification of requested from the bidders on questions regarding their RFP responses. What it was that the math did not work. So this is the first time that I've ever seen that we have that a scoring committee in score these points, that the first time we went through, we had 2 renditions, thus the dates the 30th and the 17th. The first time we had a 0.02, 0.2 of a point difference between the 2 bidders.
Oh.
The one member was not in the room initially to go through and have that discussion with everybody else. So he went through and read the proposals and came back in, and we talked about it a little bit more, and the score changed to 0.9 difference. So it was a little bit hard. Then we did have the issue of math on a proposal. The bottom line stayed the same, so we were able to then move forward with the firm. The firm that went out by 9/10 of a point was Freeman French Truman.
I'm sorry,
Freeman French Truman,
French.
an old firm here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They've done work
Sorry.
for the state house and stuff like
They're
that.
not in Brattleboro. Exactly.
No.
It's okay.
On between October and January of 2023, we just requested clarification from the agency administration of the funding sources because there are no ARPA funds for those 3 items. How we're going to go through and pay for these, they should be done at the same time, like the mist sprinkler system. If there's an addition, probably would be required at that point in time. Our insurance company is looking to have that installed. So we wanted to incorporate all that into the project if we were going to go forth with it. So we were looking to have that done. We drafted a memo of approval and was signed through, and so we were able to send out on the 31st of January a notice to proceed to the bidder. During the same time frame of October to January, I lost my project manager on this. He took a job for the federal government in Washington, D.C., and so then we had to regroup with a new project manager on this and bring them up to speed. We've had our kickoff meeting on September 6th. And we anticipate construction to be completed in June of 27th. And the only reason for that mainly is the fact that that is when the ARPA funds run out and we have to spend our money by that point in time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our schedule timeline for delivery is in June. We're doing our programming. Once we complete with our programming, and we'll be starting schematic design in November. Now, since these slides have been created, I think the schematic design part is going to change a little bit because we're looking to have in place from our designers. Right now, they're looking at still the end of June of having the programming complete and BGS having their Sergeant at Arms having their review in place, and then be able to move forward with that recommendation. And then in January of 2025, having their design development complete. July 2025, the construction documents will be completed, and then we'll have construction done in December of 2027.
That's just for the plans.
All construction, everything in that place. Now, part of that problem is is going through this programming and then it's schematic design, what are we really going to have for a project? Is it going to be an addition, is it just rearranging committees and offices that are in the space that's owned now and operated by the legislature? Or is it an addition of 1 or 2 committee rooms or whole new floor or everything else? That still comes into play. I did forget one item that is included in there. We are also evaluating under ARPA the entryway here at the loading dock, where they have stagings and so it's nice to come down on top. That also is included in this. We are evaluating under ARPA that was the only entrance that was used during the pandemic. And so it really needs to be enhanced to allow proper functioning and screening in a pandemic situation. And so that's why that cost the project. So I apologize for leaving that up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, programming, is that computer programming? Is that meeting of the minds around programmatic setup? I'm just trying to understand what that word means.
The latest part of that, it's really what it is you're getting the A&E team together and they are working with the client, if you will, the legislature and everybody else. They're conducting a survey. They've done this a few years ago, and now we're following back up again with a few other people. And then they're coming together. What are the needs?
Okay.
And how do those needs relate to what is being requested?
For the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch, BGS Commissioner. So rather than using programming, we could just say planning. Does that make a lot more sense if we just call it planning?
Thank you.
That's the architectural term. But planning is what I like to use.
And, yeah, whatever.
So thank you. The firm that won the bid, I'm trying to be in their place. So now they know they got the job. And at some point, they got to begin ordering material, I would assume, and lining up people to work. But you've got a 2-year period where, again, you could have inflationary pressure, supply chain issues. How do they, I mean, maybe I shouldn't be asking you, maybe I should be asking Frank Freeman or whatever. How do they deal with that? Because the price is probably going to go up at some point.
Well,
I could go down though.
it could. It could. You don't know. But right now, up until July 2025, it is Freeman French Freeman just completing the design. We are looking to do construction management on this so we can pre-order materials and the likes of that. So in that case, that to help answer your question is we don't know when you're planning for something that far ahead. Like in the Williston Public Safety Facility, we had a construction manager on board. We brought them in early and they were starting to buy out the job as early as we could. And that meant getting prices from subcontractors and subcontractors getting them from suppliers and the likes of that. Everybody was giving their best price at the time. Wood was the worst anomaly out there that said, well, the cost of wood is the day that we deliver. So how do you put a price tag on that? And so what we put in the documents for Williston was that the construction firm, the construction manager must act, subcontractors must act diligently by a certain date to get that price to us. Knowing that some things will still fluctuate, we had an allowance to cover this just in case. But they had to prove to us that, you know, they had their contract in place, they had to place their order. If that order was placed and the market went up, well, then we would go into that allowance to cover that cost.
Okay.
Because if we could say it was the contractor's fault or somebody else's fault in that line, it was just because of the economics, the way things would be. It actually worked out well that way. We have not touched our contingency line item rate for cost escalations, and we would deal with this also.
I'm going to give you a much shorter version of your question, which is at the end of every phase of both planning and design, and there's 3 phases in design, the architect does a refined cost estimate. So this is how we know, this is how we sort of have a big target, and as we get closer to the project, it goes like this. So, so it's a great question, and we're going to have refined estimates over time.
And what about if it does go down? What about if we hit an economy, you know, a bad economy and projects aren't there, you know, do we have a way to recoup any of that money?
If there are savings, like the allowance that's there and it's not touched, that does return to the state. So with construction management, those savings that are not expended return to the state. But as to if
But
it's
even
a hard
if,
bid and we don't know about it, it's, it's between the supplier and the subcontractor, or subcontractor, we would not know that.
So it'd be just the luck of the builder if they bid it at the high prices based on today's numbers and everything just kind of went south in the economy and it was just, they're just gonna make more money on the project.
Because it's construction management is open book, there would still be an opportunity to revisit that. The economy just tanked. People are looking for work. We could say, could we rebid this and then get a better price? The risk of rebidding is no bidder.
Right.
Or you don't get the savings you were necessarily looking for, and there's time lost in that. So I mean, that does come into play, but we've actually have done that before. I've done that on a project. And it was beneficial, but you don't do it on everything because of what's going on, but the higher price ticketed items are certainly worth looking at.
Is there anything that you guys control, which I know that you do on some of it, but are the components of it that you control? Are you guys, is BGS doing the HVAC systems and all of that? Is the construction, or is the builder doing everything?
The builder does it all.
Okay.
We are there to, Clerk Works, who's on site daily to make sure that they're conforming to plans and specifications. And then we have a project manager who meets weekly, bi-weekly, depending on the size of the project, to make sure that they're conforming to the plans and specifications. And money that's being, they're requisitioning for payment has actually been expended or purchased in the field. So, yes, that's our oversight.
Got a simple solution. Save a lot of money. Take the cafeteria and move it to the next building over here. Solve your problem. Take the cafeteria, put it all in committee rooms. The only thing you wouldn't have in this building is a cafeteria.
And Senator, we actually are going to be trying a micro market in the basement of 133. There used to be a cafe there, but it wasn't, it didn't bring in a lot of money.
Right.
And so it just never carried forward, but we're putting in a micro market and we're gonna see how it goes. And so if you don't know what a micro market is, because I didn't know, kind of like it's a little mini grocery store. And when you leave, and there's cameras and things, but when you leave, you pay for your item. So then somebody comes in and looks at how fast are you having yogurt or sandwiches or salads, and then they start bringing those in at a certain rate. So we're gonna give it a try. We're gonna see how that goes.
Well, the other question, I guess, is that,
Well done.
Sorry, Sean.
That's right. No, it's some of those issues that we've talked about many times, and there's plenty of space in this building without the cafeteria. The cafeteria is something we could relocate. And I mean, we've talked about it a few times, but that whole cafeteria, that's huge. I mean, for office space or for committee rooms. And you just have to go down across the hall there or down to the cafeteria. I mean, I know it's probably not on the radar, but I know we've talked about it years ago. When we were talking about this and started off with it. I know it's not been explored because people want, I guess they want the cafeteria in this building. It's a thought.
well, and the other question I have into that is, I mean, we're far into this project. Yeah, I know it probably has to come back to us at some point in time, but so that's the plan. I mean, when will that come before the legislature, so the legislature votes on that?
I think when you see the House bill, there's language in there for that.
Okay.
And so that the basically end of.
At the end of programming.
Yeah, I think right now, and it's draft language and they're stairs, but it says the Joint Legislative Management Committee and the chairs of the corrections and institutions committees will meet and make a decision. I think that's what they, as of this morning.
So we will present that to that group. So you give them, this is where we're at. This is.
I guess I better go see the house.
Another meeting to go to. For the record, we make nothing on the cafeteria. We pay all expenses.
We subsidize them.
Yeah, we subsidize that cafeteria, and the prices they charge, as you know, that cafeteria brings in zero. We give them money, we pay the utilities, we pay everything. They make the money. So it's not a benefit to us at all, the cafeteria. I understand it's a benefit to us, we want to get a coffee or something, but it's not the end of the world, because it's not, they're offering low prices for the legislators, because you know, we've been up there.
Oh, I know that.
It's, anyway, just a thought.
On you go, sir.
Anything else on the delivery time?
No.
Okay, next slide, next and last slide. So the architect's next step in planning, is what we'll be doing is BGS and the architect, we got, contract is on its way to being executed, however, we've got a letter of intent, the exception that allows them to start work, so they're already working on this. Where they are to review the existing studies and plans of the addition that have been done, so they capture all that knowledge. Because it is Freeman French Freeman, they were part of an existing study, so they're ahead of the bell curve on that also. As I mentioned earlier, to evaluate the rooms, the cafeteria, the space, all the spaces in the State House and other used and occupied spaces to incorporate proper spatial distancing. That still has to decide what that number is. If it is a number, is it based on airflow or how many people can fit in the room? Logical layout or something like that, that has to be defined. Then we developed a solution for the entrance to the building to the back here to provide the security needs, storage, and likes of that. We do our code review. Then we investigate the water mist system. There has been a design for that, so the investigation of that should not take that long. It's just how to incorporate it into the rest of the project and the cost. And then also to investigate what the future infrastructure needs are going to be. So that's going to play out through the planning process and all through design. So at each phase of design, it gets refined until you're down at the end of your construction document phase, and that goes out to your contractor to bid and give us a price.
So this is very helpful. So the evaluate phase is interesting, and I'm just thinking about how we've expressed just how gorgeous this building is, and being in this building is helpful to us, just mentally. But how do you evaluate, for example, the committee meetings, especially the public hearings that can't happen in the buildings? I'm sorry, in the historic rooms, is it 10 and 11? The big rooms in the middle?
10 and 11, yes.
Right, and so those have been held over at the pavilion. And so it's less of a quality, but the meetings are still happening. They aren't, it's not like we're not able to meet, but it would just be nicer in terms that are hard to measure, to have them in the building. Is that a component of this?
Yes, it is, because that's all part of that planning phase. We're gonna go through and go, okay, you do have that space, if you maintain it, this is what goes on over there. But there are reasons why that's not, a great idea for one reason or another, and then that has to be weighed. So when we do present that, that'll be part of that presentation is you use your existing space right over here. No addition needs to be done. We just have to do the rear entrance and the likes of that. Could that work? And there could be a lot of reasons why it doesn't work from the point of view of the legislature.
Right.
But under ARPA, which only cares about health and safety, ventilation, and physical distancing, I just want to be eyes wide open, they will probably come back and recommend institutionalizing what you did during the pandemic, which is the use of 2 and 4 Aiken and the use of the connector.
Yeah.
So that means if that was the outcome, I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying we had a lot of back and forth with Guidehouse on this. If that's the outcome from the planning and programming portion, we're at a stopping point because we can't keep going. So my point is that if the study comes back and says, we think you should do what you did during the pandemic, and that's the recommendation that would be ARPA-led, again, ARPA-PAT, then funding becomes an issue to continue to advance it.
So then could the legislature allocate additional funding that was not ARPA funding if there was a use that didn't comply with
So
those?
chose, they absolutely could.
Okay,
So where did we end up on a bid? How much? Is that public knowledge?
The contract hasn't been executed yet,
Okay.
less than what we thought.
but that's the design contract, that's not the construction.
That is correct. We only have 1.5 million of ARPA funds, and that is not gonna cover, if it's a full-blown addition, all that will not.
Just think how many years it would take. We haven't had the air in this building for 20 years. We can't even
Almost.
upgrade
Well, we could offer to open the window, that would see how much that
So
costs.
just think how long this would take.
And is all the monies that we're talking about spending ARPA monies?
Right now, it's only the 1.5.
Okay.
ARPA monies that have been provided for
So
this
it's got to be an
project.
appropriation.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so I'm beginning to appreciate your ability to negotiate and maneuver around the ARPA sort of set of regulations and then having to negotiate with a General Assembly for other monies. It must be awful.
So
I
there's
can't imagine
no,
that.
so there is no set aside monies other than the 1.5 to help with construction costs of that.
That is correct. But then again, we don't know what we're constructing yet.
Okay.
We'll have a better idea of the mass at the end of planning. You know, if a recommendation is an expansion or the likes of that, or if it's just, you know, continuing as we are today with using the pavilion in Two Aiken, or, you know, some minor renovations that way. But yes, addition, so that'll come out of programming, schematic design will actually, you know, define that a lot better as to what's being done. And so through the additional design phases.
Yeah, it's quite a process.
Well, and then it's how does it weave in with the State House HVAC project? So Senator,
Yep.
your air handlers were supposed to be here in November.
I've been hearing that since I was a kid.
Wow.
Those air handling systems, and it's been every year since I've been on this committee, we got bad air.
Your air handlers
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
were
Coincidence?
supposed to be here in November.
Yeah.
We call
I'm
every
not blaming
week.
you, but I'm just telling you, every commissioner I've talked to over the years, we're gonna get clean air here. Oh, yeah, you're
That's
on.
fair.
And we're still
Senator.
dying.
Very fair.
Well, the technology's getting better.
Oh, yeah, the technology's.
Yeah.
I just want you to know that we are calling the supplier on a weekly basis for a ship date, and they won't give us a ship date. This happened in Essex as well. They won't give us a ship date until they're confident they can ship it. And then I don't know if the air handler units have been ordered for the house, but we finished contract documents, and it was my understanding the contractor, the construction manager was going to be calling and ordering them.
He'll be retired by that year.
I know it's taking a long time, Senator, I understand.
It's not good. So if we ever had this state house expansion, it's gonna be 50 years here, so.
So the build time, I mean, you got 2 years built into that, but are they gonna construct during the session? Or they're gonna construct not, they're not gonna do it during at all?
We would have to shut down. But again, it all depends what's going on. You know, it is hard to say that if speakers, if we did an addition over the existing cafeteria, no matter what's going on, David starts that construction, there would be some noise. Maybe the cafeteria could still function with that noise, but there is a committee room there. There's also the speaker's office and most of that, so probably it would not happen, that it would be better off to plan ahead to shut down during the legislative session than it would be to try and say, well, let's give it a try and see what happens. Some people home or you can't work on this during this hours and the likes of that. But a lot of it's also gonna depend on what the project is. You know, like if I was to do that with the air handler project, if the air handler had come in right now, would we put it in? No, because we would have no air. Or maybe for a senator, that would be better because we would go to the windows. But other than that, that would be a little bit different. But I mean, so those are the things we take into account and off session.
So the silver lining on the cloud, which is what I've been trying to tell people, is that yes, the air handlers have been delayed, and that is unfortunate. We're gonna do everything we can, right, to keep going at that supplier. On the positive side, the timeline might line up for making changes to some of the rooms in the house with the installation of the air handler units and modifying the ducts, because we're gonna have to increase some of the size of the ducts, which means we're gonna have to poke holes in walls anyway. So if we're poking holes in walls and potentially the ceiling, we might as well do it all at the same time versus I move things around and then in a year or two later, we're back in there modifying spaces and ripping out a wall or ripping out a ceiling a second time. So there is a silver lining to the cloud, and it may be what is most cost effective for the taxpayers of Vermont, which is something that we should always be striving for.
Where's the governor? on this? Do we know? The
Governor is
you guys,
very opposed to state house expansion.
Very what?
Opposed.
To any
So what drives this push forward for the State House expansion? Who is that? Is it the House that's pushing it? I mean, somebody's pushing. So if the governor's opposed of it, who's pushing the expansion idea?
My understanding is it's the Speaker's office.
Okay.
Is it in this?
My understanding is right now, they are working to put a dollar figure in the capital bill
Okay.
It's gonna be,
from the House side.
the project is 30, 40 million, is that correct? Yeah.
The latest estimate that I knew was 24 million, but to everybody's point here, right, that was,
That was a lot.
that was,
30, 40 million.
so we don't know, we won't know until
No,
the planning study's done.
it's hard to price on what's gonna happen 2 years, 3 years, but the last I heard was around 25, 30 million, so that'll be more than that. That's a lot of money for the public, I'll tell you that.
Thank goodness it's your problem.
Thank you so much.
I love the challenge.
Yeah, favorite.
I know, just remember, the House has not increased size, the Senate has not increased size. And I know the committee rooms, some of them have been, a little tight, but nothing has changed.
Well, if anything, they're starting to loosen up a little bit because of technology and, you talk to the lobbyists around and they're walking around the hallway and, oh, hold on, oh, I'm just listening in and they'll tell you that it's very nice to have the technology. So they're not in there like that. And there used to be whole strategies as far as having placeholders of people coming in there and sitting down in a spot so that they could save a spot for their lobbyist. And so, I mean, we don't have that anymore. I can remember coming down here testifying some years ago, and it was wall to wall. It was just craziness. It really was, but
We had the press too back then.
yeah.
People love it, they watch it, but they don't have to come here, they see what's going on. Well, we got somebody across the whole thing, remember they said they
Yeah.
watched the whole thing yesterday?
Yeah.
So they didn't bother to come yesterday, they watched it all, and they testified.
Or if they can't watch it, they can go and get on it later,
Yeah.
so they can watch it later.
Oh, yeah,
You don't have to watch it live.
No, it's a changing world, it's just been amazing to me, we're talking 30, 40 million dollars, and I don't think it's gonna be a fast sell to the public, I'll tell you. Not with all the other demands we have on state government. But.
One of the alternatives they'll be looking at is what can you do internally within the existing footprint of this building to
Yeah.
try to better meet the goals of the
Right.
General Assembly.
Yeah.
I'll be interested in seeing
That'd be interesting.
that. I live in a very small house and I've made minor modifications to it over time, so it flows and functions better for our family.
Yeah.
It was a starter home. We're gonna stay in that until my kids, at least until our kids go to college. So who knows, again, what the outcomes of all of these planning studies will be. It could come back and say it's not possible too. I don't know, but I do think that there's some opportunity within the footprint of the building.
At one time, there were 246 members of the House. 1965, cut down to 150 members. And the cafeteria was down the lower floor. And then they raised the floor to put the cafeteria, but there was 246 members of the House and 30 was the Senate. Functioned here for years, until 1965, reinforcement. But, so, I mean, in many areas, it's not crowded. Committee rooms, like you said, they do want to expand their committee size rooms, but the committees haven't expanded. It all depends whether you want to spend $40 million. That's what it boils down to, or spend 10 million maybe, or to do what you do inside this place.
There are times in the cafeteria where it's not flowing very well.
No,
But that's more a manpower problem, I think, than anything.
yeah, I
If they could have two people on the cash registers all the time,
Right.
you could put people through faster.
Has it been determined to whether you can build on that upper level?
No, that is part of
Okay.
this process.
Supposedly it was designed.
Chairman's always says it was designed for another floor above it.
Right. Yes.
So then you'll also look at like staff quarters and
Yes,
offices and that kind of stuff too.
basically all spaces inside of the buildings that are under control of the legislature right now.
So and the governor's area, do you just assume that stays the same?
Yes.
I mean, I would. Yeah, 'cause
I
it-
think there are some easy outcomes of the study though, right?
Yeah.
They had one access into the State House, and we know ADA access into this building is less than ideal.
Yes,
So like, to me, when the study comes back, I think that's gonna be an easy win, where they're gonna say, you use this one access for ADA during the pandemic, but it's not ideal at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's a clear winner I think, in my mind. And there's other clear winners as well, but that's an example where I think the study's gonna come back and say, absolutely, you need to do something better for ADA access in the building.
Correct, and the code evaluation would be great, and then I think David Sheets told us about, someone told us about how many more people are actually using this building as their office, because they can, and we've had to increase the internet capability. So is that part of the conversation?
No.
Because that evidently has made the space more crowded, and I think that happens in the cafeteria too. Is that people are actually working there, not in the food part, but in the part where you eat. Folks
Even
are-
in the food part, that's why they end up putting the signs on the table.
Well, that's what I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
like in that part where they say, you can't have computers here at lunch or something.
I'd like to see us get better security in this building. We're still not, where's the camera situation? I asked you,
No.
where's the camera situation?
That's Chief Romei, Senator.
Excuse me?
That would be Chief Romei.
We
He's
can get-
responsible for all the
We
cameras.
have some room.
I can't believe, I've said this for years, how open this building is. Not that I want it closed, but there's no security whatsoever in this building. On Tuesday morning, you go up to the governor's office like there was yesterday, hundreds of people in there. There's no security. I mean, that's how open it is, and that's good. I'm not saying it's bad, but on the other hand, we should have some cameras somewhere. I've said that for years in the halls. If something does happen, at least you got we got nothing. Where you go today without cameras?
We get the chief in here.
It's my understanding, and
Well,
Tricia may have been part of that, but
That's not your problem.
it's my understanding that the chief is going to try to get some grant money and has done some coordination with HP already to look at where they could put cameras into the building.
Where the chief in?
That's my understanding.
We're serious. I can't believe how open it is. I visited quite a few capitals in my lifetime, and boy, there's security.
right.
Try to get in the courthouse today. Oh, no, you don't get in the courthouse unless you're really screened, leave your wallet, leave everything
Yeah.
there. But yet this building, and there's a lot of people, it's a different world we're living in today, and I can't understand how we can't even have cameras in the hall or outside the building. Someone could come in here now and do something, and there's no record. It's frightening, it really is. It's especially where exposed as, politicians are politicians, there's a lot of, but I wish I'd get an update, that would be great, to just to hear where it's at.
So bring him in. Linda will get him in. What else?
Yes, hi, I'm Tricia Harper. I'm your facilities coordinator
Yeah.
hired by the legislature. And then on the cameras, the biggest issues on the cameras was trying to get them in the building because the legislators were, the privacy, the HR, et cetera. So they are being worked at. I'm in total agreement with you as far as we do need a security control point in this building, an ADA access point in this building, and we have an opportunity to do this in this outside area here. I've also found out we don't really need the ledge council stairs that communicate there. They can be taken out so we can have a full run back and forth. We can have, but this is up to the architects that are hired now, so, but that is possible. But I want to go back to the committee rooms, what you had said earlier about, we are not providing handicap access in those committee rooms, period. You can't, even in this room, to do a 5-foot spin if someone's in a chair. And we need to have spaces for people. This building needs to be accessible to everybody. It's the people's building and not accessible to everybody for that fact. And that is the problem within the building. You could try to go up there. I couldn't even walk through in a cafeteria and try to be in a chair or even, have more than one chair in here. So it is an issue and that's, 40. I think that the project itself, in management of it, that there's ways to look at this and what we're able to do. And I think that they're doing that, the better, best, situation at different levels. But there are things that need to be looked at in this building that are not glitzy. You're not going to see them. And one of the things that I've been stressing is the structure in the building. And Joe's talking infrastructure. But the structure of this building that we're in right now, 1858 building, and I put scaffolding up there when we did the restoration of it's all the trusses are checked up there. They have cracks in them and things like that. And we insulated back in 24 ton. So I've increased the snow load on the roof, even though most of it slides off pretty much. But still, it's something that needs to be addressed. And that's another non-blitzy thing that needs to, we shouldn't even begin putting systems in there till we slide these beams. Open up the roof and slide these beams is what I think is entailed in order to support that structure. So, and we did that back in the 70s. If you go up there, you can see the green beams that are up in the dome because of the hurricane that had torqued something up there or whatever, the loads. But we do need to look at that too. And it's not a small price tag, but we need to take these things. You know, the building is, well, every building, any building you have requires constant care and maintenance in order for it to continue to be of good use for everybody. And I think, and I just, you know, the language that's coming out now for the, that will help us keep moving forward. So that's key in developing the program that they're developing now and with the review of the program for schematic design. And so with that committee, that special committee, I guess, whatever you're calling it, is key to keeping this project moving forward with the ARPA funding. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Committee, anything else?
All set.
No, it's been useful. And we do actually want to see it upstairs
Yeah, we're gonna go on,
ourselves.
we're gonna go on
We're gonna
Thursday.
take a tour.
On
We're going
Thursday.
on Thursday.
So I don't know if next week you would want
Yeah.
to show us where the beams would go.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. It's gonna be done by a structural engineer and
There it is.
And I did have a very, basically, we did, when I was with BGS, we did have an assessment, quick assessment done that called out that this needs to be addressed along with this system that we'd be incorporating in those attics too. But,
So next week.
very good. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be here next week.
Oh,
That's okay. I was just.
Thank you, I'm worried about
Anything else, committee? Anybody